A very good afternoon to the speakers, moderator, and all the participants present in our today's VCM on basics of faceless assessment and different investment avenues. Women Members Empowerment Committee of the IC has always come forward to upskill and update members on the contemporary issues pertinent in both professional and personal sphere. Our today's VCM is one of our various initiatives undertaken for our women members to make them professionally competent. We will be discussing important features of the faceless assessment scheme, which was launched in 2020 with the objective of promoting an efficient and effective tax administration and minimizing physical interface. Our second topic for the day is on different investment avenues available for us in globalized environment. Both the topics will be taken up by eminent speakers, CA Saroj Maniyar Madam and CA Nidhi Agarwal Madam. To moderate our today's program, we have with us CA Neetul Khandelwal Madam. She is both a qualified CA and CS and is also pursuing LLB. She's in practice since last 11 years in Kota, Rajasthan, and was the chairperson of Kota branch of CARC of ICA in the year 2019-20. She has been serving the institute since last 6 years in various capacities in Executive Committee of Kota branch. Over to you, Madam, for taking the program ahead.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. A very good afternoon to all of you, to all the respected members. I would like to welcome, and today I feel privileged and honored to welcome all the respected members who have joined with us either virtually or I would like to welcome our speakers, our eminent speakers of the day. Secretary ma'am, welcome. Shanuji. Today we are going to discuss on two topics. One is faceless assessment, which is a hot cake for today, and the next one is what are the investment opportunities for, and what are the portfolio management, and what are the investment opportunities in this for female members. So for this, we have very learned speakers with us for with assessment, faceless assessment. What are the do's and don'ts? We have Saroj ma'am, Saroj Maniyar ma'am. We welcome you, ma'am. And for portfolio management, we have CA Nidhi Agarwal ji. I would like to introduce the CA Saroj ma'am with you. She is a qualified chartered accountant and a rank holder in a final CS exams also. Ma'am is engaged in practice since last 30 years, and she was the managing partner of Maniyar and Maniyar Chartered Accountants before its merger to CNK and Associates. Now, Saroj ma'am is partner in CNK and Associates LLP, which is specialized in the fields of direct taxation, representation, and advisory. She also handles the human resources initiatives in the firm. Ma'am is also actively involved in professional forums and has been the member of Direct Tax Committee of Western India Regional Council. Now she is currently the member of Taxation Committee of the Bombay Chartered Accountants Society. She has delivered talks on the various professional subjects at different forums and has contributed articles to the Economic Times also. Economic Times of India, Outlook Investor, and a column in a Mint. Outlook Investor and a column in a Mint. I would like to welcome you, ma'am. And now I would like to, we would like to hear from you. Please, ma'am, I would forward to you for your session. Over to you, ma'am. Saroj ma'am.
Thank you, Neetu, for the warm introduction. Thank you, the Institute, for inviting me. It's always a pleasure being amongst professionals and more so amongst the women members, because like I keep on saying, women members have to work a bit more harder than their male counterparts to reach at the same level. Whilst that is changing in a lot of cities, and for example, in our office, we've taken lots of initiatives to ensure that support is given to women members whenever required some additional support. We ensure that they are at par with everybody, and I think we are seeing women even moving faster. We are seeing a lot of, in my office we have 25% women partners, and we have more than 50% women CAs. So I think that's the way to go. And we women, all of you would agree, we are kind of, we all are capable of multitasking. We are able to do a lot of things, and no less than any man that we've known. And yeah, thank you, Shanu. Thank you, Nidhi. Look forward to hearing your session also. So I'll not take too much time, stick to my time, and let me share the screen. Yeah, can you all see my screen?
Yes, ma'am. We're
Yeah.
able to see.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for joining in. And as you know,
Excuse me, ma'am. If you can just make it a PPT presentation, okay, slideshow.
yeah.
I
Yes,
think
ma'am.
it's a slideshow. Yeah.
Now it's okay, ma'am.
Okay.
So as you know, today's topic is faceless assessment. We look at the broad features, we look at do's and don'ts. I'm conscious we have only about 40-45 minutes. So we'll avoid getting into all the academic kind of provisions. We'll try and get more into the practical provisions. Um, so I'll start with by saying that we all know nothing is constant except change. So the law is evolving, law is changing, and not only the law, the procedures are also evolving. And there has been a lot of changes in the procedure. When I go back to memory lane and remember how we used to appear for scrutiny proceedings, maybe about 25, 28 years back, almost every case was being selected for scrutiny. So it was inevitable that every year your case would come up under scrutiny, but scrutiny was done, it was the officers had their own methods to do it. They were not all that updated. They were not all that savvy in terms of technology and things like that. And whatever details one gave, they had to accept it. We had to explain. There was a lot of explanation and all that. And over the years, that has been changing. It's becoming more and more objective, if I may say so. The law is evolving. The officers are aware of what the issues are, what stands are being taken in various decisions, and what are the critical issues pertaining to each industry. For example, pharma industry has certain issues. The real estate industry always had issues, but now the department knows that what are the stands that are acceptable in terms of litigation. And again, without going too much back in the past, we know since the last about 3-4 years, there has been this concept of e-assessment, not faceless assessment, e-assessment, where we had to, kind of give the file the data online, but we still had to go and meet the officers, maybe give them copies. So whilst one had to make PDFs of all the documents and upload it, one also had to take printouts and, give copies to the assessing. So come 13th of August 2020, our PM, came with a very powerful message. And he said there are going to be transformational changes in the working of the tax department. There are going to be huge changes in the modalities of completing the assessment. And there will be no physical interface. And everything is not only e-assessment, it is faceless assessment. So it is not your assessing officer who's going to do your assessment. It is going to be some unknown assessing officer who will be doing your assessment. And there is no way, as an assessor, you would know who is doing your assessment. And that is also through there would be a mechanism to distribute the assessments. That mechanism also will be electronic. So there is no discretion. Basically, that was the pitch of the entire talk. So if we'll spend a couple of minutes on just seeing the background, how this digitization has, kind of progressed over a period. So sometime in 2004-5, the TDS statements became electronic. That time we had to put it in a CD drive. There used to be those floppies. Earlier it was floppies and then it was CD drives, and we had to submit that. We had to give that data on that floppy drive and CD drive to the tax officers. Then there was electronic filing of returns of corporates. First year it was not mandatory, then it became mandatory. Then there was electronic filing of assessees where tax audit was mandatory. And slowly over the period, there has been as good as electronic filing of tax returns for almost everybody. And the whole idea is this is all, kind of improving the it is improving that, it is ensuring that taxes are paid. It is ensuring that non-compliance is deterred. It is ensuring fairness in tax administration and things like that. The tax department also in the last couple of years I mean, we'll not talk about the last 6 months, the challenges that the department has faced, but if we see the last couple of years, the digitization that has taken place, the project inside, the information that the tax department has collated is absolutely, it's mind-boggling. They are using artificial intelligence, they are using big data analytics and all that. So they are completely, kind of changing with the times. Whilst 15-20 years back, most of the tax officers were not even familiar using a computer to its optimal capacity. They would perhaps use it more to type out their orders and nothing else. But today they are as savvy as you and me. So to say, they are as quick, as prompt in using technology. So the whole idea about, and this is the history from 2015, there were e-communications, emails used to be sent, then there was faceless assessment. Earlier, there were notifications which introduced the e-assessment and faceless assessment, whilst there was no specific provision in the law. Last year, when the Taxation Amendment Act had come, there 144B was introduced. So now the faceless amendment, the faceless assessments is a part of the law. Earlier, it was a part of the law by way of notification. Now it is there in the act itself. It's a part of the law. And perhaps I think the last 2 years, maybe because of the pandemic also, the speed of digitization has improved, because the department also, because of the pandemic, there was no question of, people going and explaining and all that. That also kind of sped up the whole thing. It assisted in speeding up the whole thing. Now, again, if we go back to the speech of the Prime Minister, I think the term that he kept on using was honoring the honest. He said that we want to ensure that there is, the honest taxpayers are not facing any challenges. We want to eliminate the face-to-face interactions. We want to improve the ease of doing business. We want to bring greater levels of transparency, efficiency, accountability, and we don't want the honest taxpayers to be burdened with any subjectivity. And this was a step in the e-governance program. Again, going back to when there was this task force formed under Dr. Parthasarathy Shome, he had also recommended that the department needs to use technology to ensure better governance in terms of assessments, in terms of litigation, and all the processes that the department is following, that the tax department is following. So this is also a step to further the governance, the government's e-governance program. Also functional specialization, because if there are teams who understand, say, for example, transfer pricing, they should be doing transfer pricing. Teams who understand more of international tax and say tax treaties should be doing international tax scrutiny. And it is not, the scrutiny is not dependent on one officer or one person. There is a team, there is an entire team who is going to be doing your assessment. And so there is a lot of back-end support which the assessing officer gets, and not your jurisdictional assessing officer, but the one who's doing your assessment in the assessment unit. And accordingly, even the cost of compliance. I had mentioned that earlier, the faceless assessment was happening pursuant to various notifications, and those notifications also have, over the period, that there are about 6-7 notifications which have set out the procedures. From 1st April 2021, Section 144B, which was introduced by the Taxation Amendment Act, that is giving the entire process. So most of the provisions which were there in the schemes are now enacted, and they are part of the law as to who will conduct it, what is the scope, what are the rights of the board and different units. And I will share this presentation. So whatever are the, this can be kept with you. Now, there is often a little of a confusion as to which are the cases which are under faceless assessment and which are the cases which are not under faceless assessment. And whilst the law is very clear about a couple of things, like, for example, the international tax assessments or central circle assessment, where there's been search and seizure and things like that, it's not very clear about everything. We've listed out a couple of different proceedings with comments as to who would be the appropriate jurisdictional officer to carry out that. So, for example, now rectification. We have seen, because last year was the first year in which, faceless assessments, when I say last year, it means, last couple of months when we've all received orders. In a number of cases, there could have been some instances where there are errors, simple errors, arithmetical errors and things like that, for which a rectification application has to be filed. So that rectification application has to be filed before the jurisdictional officer, because there is no faceless officer who is responsible for that rectification. Whilst there is going to be a faceless rectification also, right now there is no scheme which has been introduced. So if there is a demand and maybe some credits have not been given, or maybe there's some error, then that rectification application has to be filed before the jurisdictional officer. Similarly, the stay proceedings, when the demands are raised and follow-up of demand, those letters come from the jurisdictional officer. The stay proceedings have to be filed before the jurisdictional officer. Similarly, if one has received CIT appeal orders or ITAP, High Court, Supreme Court orders, the appeal effects will happen by the jurisdictional officer, and the refund determination, etc., has to be done by the jurisdictional officer. Similarly, the jurisdictional officer has to file appeal. So if there is a ITAT order in favor or CIT appeal or any order in favor, the jurisdictional officer has to take it to the next level if he or she thinks that this is appealable. Similarly, the audit functions, the departmental audit, that happens at the jurisdictional officer level. Now, the final assessment order pursuant to the DRP directions, that happens at the assessment unit. And we'll come to the different units in the faceless assessment. Similarly, passing a fresh order in set-aside assessment proceedings. So if there is an appeal effect given, there are clear directions in the ITAT order or High Court or Supreme Court order, that is an appeal effect. If the ITAT or High Court or Supreme Court has set aside the proceedings for fresh verification, that will happen at the faceless level by the assessment unit. Similarly, proceedings under 263, 264 will happen at the jurisdictional CIT or principal CIT level. Right now, there's no scheme notified for faceless. Recording of reasons, issue of notice. Now, this is something we've all seen in the last, 3 to 6 months. We've received various notices under 147, 148. So those notices are issued by the assessing officer. We need to respond, asking for reasons and, filing our objections to the reasons for reopening. This all happens before the jurisdictional assessing officer. Proceedings before the DRP, the GAR panel, then valuation by DPO, all this happens by the jurisdictional authorities, because there is no provision in the faceless assessment as of now for these proceedings. Similarly, TDS assessments, international tax assessments, and central charges, that happens at the jurisdictional assessing officer. Transfer pricing, currently the jurisdictional TPO takes, they complete the transfer pricing assessments, but one doesn't know whether going forward, these technical units, there are special technical units for transfer pricing, whether they will take it up. So that is the exclusion. Then there has been a recent circular on 6th of September, which has said that CBDT, whilst the provision was always there that the CBDT has powers to transfer certain assessments to the jurisdictional officer, to my mind, till about a month back, I don't think any such scrutiny, any such pending assessments were transferred. But now, possibly we will see more of that. Again, if we go to last 2-3 months, the challenges that have been faced at the portal and whichever assessments, whilst originally the assessments were supposed to be completed by March, that was extended to June and now extended to September. So those assessments, whilst there were pending proceedings, there were challenges in the portal of being able to upload the relevant information, as well as even get access to the portal at times. So because of that, there are, whilst there are no direct options for any manual hearing, any physical hearing, but the department is aware of it, and they have said that wherever required, we will give that the personal hearing can be granted. So those are the certain changes which have taken place in the recent past. Similarly, as far as exclusions, we have seen that from the faceless assessment, central charges, international charges, those are excluded. Also, wherever the pendency cannot be created on the portal because there is no PAN or because of any technical reasons, the CBDT order has said that we will do it under the physical. We will remove it from the faceless and do it under the physical scheme. So this is broadly, this is the structure of the National Faceless Assessment Unit. So whilst there is the taxpayer on the top, then there is the National Faceless Assessment Center. Under the national, so all our notices, etc., come from the National Faceless Assessment Center. Thereafter, there are regional faceless assessment centers, and we have 30 regional faceless assessment centers as of date, and they are headed by the chief commissioners. Under the regional faceless assessment centers, we have assessment units. Now, assessment units are the units who are responsible for issuing the notices, for looking at the files and deciding that what are the areas, what are the points of scrutiny, and one will receive the notices based on the inputs that the assessment units, in for. Similarly, when the data comes, when we file the details, the assessment units also take the help of verification units. And this is all internal, this is all back-end. We do not know who's looking at what. So the verification units will, verify all the details. So for example, if they want to send summons for any cross verification, all that the verification units do. And in addition to the verification units, there are technical units who are basically specialists. So they understand the industry, they understand various provisions. They are legal, they could be legal specialists, they could be, engineers, they could be people who understand the businesses. They could be transfer pricing specialists, they would be international tax specialists and things like that. And then there are review units. So review units are the ones who actually review once a draft. If there is an addition proposed to be made, it will go to the review unit. The review unit is the one which is going to be looking at the draft assessment order, which is proposing to make any addition. So this is how the broad structure is. And this is basically, summarizing what are the functions of each of the units. As we said, the NFAC is going to assign the case to the assessment unit. All this is used by technology. So there is no human intervention. This is all through technology. The assessing unit is identifying the points, the issues. The verification unit is doing the inquiry, cross verification, etc. The technical unit is providing the advice, and the review unit is checking whether, they are finally looking at everything. They are finally looking as to whether any additions, etc., whether they have been discussed properly, whether adequate opportunities have been given, whether, applicable law or applicable judicial decisions have been considered. Now let's come to some practical issues when we talk about communication and faceless assessment. So this being the first year, all of us have faced different kinds of challenges, because every time we talk to different people, we realize that there are so many different issues that people have faced. And again, to share some personal experiences, when we received the first couple of notices, say for corporate assessees, there used to be a kind of standard questionnaire of 20 points saying that uh, please submit bank statements of all bank accounts for the entire year with narrations and explanations. Now, something like that is probably relevant to, say, a high net worth individual, or to, an individual assessee or a smaller assessee. You cannot have this kind of data requirement for a corporate assessee. So, in one of our cases, we have actually responded to say that, there are the volume of transactions is very heavy, and we have given the bank statement we've just on an ad hoc basis given the bank statement for one particular week for one account. We've given details that these are all my bank accounts, and we have said, in case you wish to ask for bank statements of any specific period, please let us know and we shall be happy to submit. And I also understand that the department themselves are trying to, kind of modify their questions and kind of ask such questions which are relevant, because they also understand that today, if we send thousands and thousands of pages we upload, they are also not going to be able to, make any sense out of it. And also there is a restriction on the upload, on the number of documents that you can upload, on the size that you can upload. That is how it is. Now, coming to what are the issues in the communication and practical issues in the faceless assessments. So one is, all the communications are through electronic mode. And when we say electronic mode, it is not emails. It is that the communication will be there on the portal. It will be there on the portal of the assessor. And internally, their communications are also by electronic mode. That is what the law says. And of course, there are exceptions which are provided, but the exceptions will be made only in consultation with the CBDT. Now, what is the authentication of the electronic record? So we have, we have been told time and again that unless there is a DIN number, unless there is the DIN number on every notice, the notice is not valid. Unless the notice says that it has been authenticated by a DSC, it is not valid. So those are the things we need to constantly keep in mind. I have not seen any notice which is there on the portal and which does not have a DIN number. So I guess all that is system generated, and the department is taking due care. If any of you have seen such notices, happy to hear that when we have the open session. And the other challenge that people were facing, as we all are aware, that before this new portal came, we were able to upload all the data through the assessee's login portal. Thereafter, when the new portal came in from June, we needed to upload all the data with a DSC. And then they said either with a DSC or through a EVC. Now, typically, when you do a corporate upload, a corporate doesn't get a EVC, because a EVC is qua the signatory. I mean, qua the assessee. So whilst the signatory for a corporate is also an individual, it would be a director or whoever DSC is registered on the portal. There was this, they also said that you need a EVC. And now again on 6th September, they have said that if you upload the electronic records through the portal, that itself is adequate. That itself is deemed to be authenticated, which is what one did in the month of Jan-Feb. So that is where we stand. So we don't need to, do it through a DSC. Any notice communication is invalid without DIN. And So every notice basically, this is again a very important thing, that every notice or other communication has to be by way of placing a copy on the assessee's registered account. That means on the portal. Or and please note that this is or, they are not saying this and this and this. So either this, or sending an authenticated copy to the registered email ID of the address assessee, or uploading a copy on the assessee's mobile app. So mobile app is under, it's still work in progress. It's still not, there's no mobile app of the tax department which is available. It's under progress. Or file and filed by followed by a real-time alert. Now, very often we have come across instances where the assessees claim that they have not received any email, any notice through email or through SMS or anything. But on the portal, the notice is there. We have also come across instances where if I log in today, there is no notice, but if I log in tomorrow, I will get a notice, but of today's date. And we'll come to the possible reason for that. So it's very important to explain to the assessees, and if we are responsible, if that is an assignment that has been given to us, to have a process by which we will be checking on a very regular basis as to whether there is any notice. So even if one has not received an email and it is there on the assessee's portal, it is deemed to be served. So it is very, very important to have a process for verification, or for, maybe what we have done again practically in some cases, in some groups where they have, a sizable number of entities, we have told them to set up a process that every alternate day, somebody will spend 10 minutes in the morning to log into each of the portals, to each of the logins, and see whether there is any pending, any notice, any pending information, anything in the to-do list on the website. So every notice or other communication shall be by way of email to registered email address. Again, there, one of the other challenges which we have faced is, very often, if there is a change in the person, the email ID also changes. So for example, if the tax head is ABC at so-and-so or at ICAI.com, and tomorrow ABC has left and it is XYZ. So then the new email ID would be XYZ at ICAI.com. But as long as in the department's record it is ABC, or in the return of income it is ABC, the department will still continue to send to ABC. And in one of the conferences which was held by the principal commissioners, we had asked this question, that if you send a notice and that notice is not served because that email ID is no longer valid, don't you get a response? Like how very often we get a return. No, we say that this email ID is invalid or this email ID does not exist. To which the department had no answer. They said, no, I mean, we don't get, or there is no such system to track it. So which means that the onus is on the assessee to ensure that whatever is to be updated is updated. And again, if we see registered email ID, there are different provisions. There are different provisions which talk about what do you mean by registered email address. So here it says registered email address means the email address at which the electronic communication may be delivered or transmitted, including, and there is no, it is not one or two, or there is no chronology to it. So here it says it is the email address available in the portal. It says, or it can be email address available in the last income tax return, or email address available in the PAN data, or in case of an assessee being an individual who possesses Aadhaar number, it is the email address available in the unique identification authority. So there are various, places from which the email ID can be extracted, including the MCA website, including, if the email address is available anywhere. In fact, Rule 127 has a different chronology. Rule 127 says email address means what is shown in the income tax return filed for that respective year. Which is why we see in some cases where you may have a CIT appeal or an ITAT matter pending for an earlier year, you will get it on that address or on that email ID. So these are the things which we have to keep in mind. So which means in short, we have to regularly see the portal, because portal pe to it will definitely be there. Irrespective of whether you have received the notice or no, we have to ensure that one regularly checks the portal. Then the other thing is, I mean, as I mentioned, we did discuss that if there is the email ID is not existing, what is to be done. So what we have also advised clients is, where there are taxation related email IDs, you do not put it ABC at ICAI India. You can put it as a designation. You can put it at taxation at ICAI.com. So that even if there is a change in the person, if you have a new person who is joining, the email ID remains the same. So that's a way to kind of maintain it on a constant basis. So that's possibly one thing which you could try, that has worked in various cases. This is again another, practical issue which one did not realize earlier. We have come across a number of decisions, and there have been various high court decisions where certain assessment orders have been stayed, where the assessee has been able to prove that some information or details have been filed, but the department has not taken cognizance and passed the order on the same day. So, for example, if department has sent a notice today saying that you filed your details by tomorrow by tomorrow 23:59, the assessee has filed it by tomorrow 23:50. But the department has passed an order saying that they have not received any data, they have not received any details, and hence the order has been passed against. So we understand that it takes about 4 hours from the time we have uploaded or the assessee has uploaded the data till the time it appears as data to the department. So very often, we should keep this in mind, that if we have a deadline of, say, today at 3 p.m., we should not file the data today at 3 p.m. or 2:45 p.m. We should try and file the data well in advance. The department is also aware, and they have also been, told that you have been giving only very short periods. You have been giving 2 days and 5 days and 3 days to submit the information. And I again understand that they have been instructed to give a reasonable period of time to file the submissions. So hopefully, if we have adequate time, we should always internally, have a deadline 24 hours prior to what it says on the notice, because there is a practical challenge. The other important thing is this concept about video conferencing. And whilst whilst there is no right to the video conferencing facility at the time, during the assessment proceedings, there is a possibility of having a personal hearing through video conferencing if we have received a draft assessment order proposing to make certain additions. So if there are no additions, then there is no concept of video conference. So what was done last year, what was done in various cases, that as a matter, when all submissions were filed, as a matter of a routine thing, one always mentioned that in case you disagree with any of the conditions, in case you disagree with any of the contentions, please give us an opportunity of personal hearing. But that letter is not adequate to ask for video conferencing. There is a tab, there is a methodology. So whenever there is a variation, you need to click on that request for VC tab, and then you may get the opportunity. Now, there also in one of our cases, we had got the opportunity and we could explain to the assessing officer. In one case, they did not, despite putting on the tab, they did not give us the opportunity, and they wrote in the assessment order that since this issue has been discussed in the last 3-4 notices, no, we do not think that granting VC will provide any further information. So they actually wrote, and did not grant this opportunity. But again, I understand that internally they have been told that whenever a VC is being sought, you must, grant it. And then there is a procedure in case you have taken a particular date and you cannot attend on that date, there is a procedure for seeking as the adjournment. If you don't seek adjournment as per that procedure, then you will not get a further opportunity. So there are different grievance resolution mechanisms also. So if you are not able to upload anything, if you're not able to, if you have any other challenges, or if some notices have not been received by you, there are grievance resolution mechanisms. One doesn't know how much they work, but there are these email IDs which are available. So for example, since I'm based out of Mumbai, in a webinar with some of the commissioners, we were told that for Mumbai also there is a specific email ID of the DC headquarters, and if you are facing any challenges either in uploading or anything, you could write to this email. So I'm sure in all these cities there would be similar email IDs which are there. The other recent thing is about the authorized representative. So for typically, since it has been faceless and since it has been just uploading, we have never really needed to, add the authorized representative unless one is signing the letters, and if there is a covering letter and one is signing, then one would attach maybe the letter of authority like one did in physical hearings. But when it comes to VC and when it comes to other things, it is better to have the chartered accountant or the tax practitioner as the authorized representative. So there is a procedure for that, and I'll not take too much time on that. Again, basis various responses provided by the tax department, certain of the developments that are likely to take place is that the size limit is likely to be increased to 500 MB. Today it is 100 MB, it is 10 attachments. You can put 10 attachments at a time of 10 MB each. The assessment units have been instructed to grant sufficient time to the assessees for submissions. They've been instructed to issue show cause before finalizing the assessment in case the assessment is prejudicial to the interest of the assessee. In fact, some of the litigation is also on the fact that without a draft assessment order, without a proper show cause and a draft assessment order, the final assessment order has come, the high courts have then, against the writ petition file, the high courts have stayed those assessment orders and have asked the department to give fresh opportunity. Similarly, the assessment units have been instructed to grant video conferencing if asked for by the assessee by clicking on the Seek VC tab. So this VC also it's a very interesting way. One cannot see who is the assessing officer. Whilst there would be an interaction, we would be on the screen. We are supposed to have all the data also which we want to present and share that data on the screen, whilst they also have access to all the data that one has filed. And it is normally for half an hour and it can be extended. So it's quite interesting, and one is able to explain in detail the factual position.
क्रॉस चेक कर लेना. हाँ पूछना.
I think somebody's mic. This is on. Yeah. So basically, the assessment units have been instructed to grant video conferencing if requested. Now we'll quickly, I think we have about 10 minutes. So we'll quickly look at the do's and don'ts. Now, the do's and don'ts which were applicable for actual assessments have to be tweaked little in terms of when we have faceless assessments, we need to remember that when we actually went and met the assessing officers, we could explain to them the background of the case, the background of the assessee, the business of the assessee. And because it was the same assessing officer who was there at least for 2 years or 3 years, he was familiar with the case. Now there is somebody sitting possibly in your city, possibly in some other city, possibly at a distance of 1,000 kilometers away, who has no idea about what is the nature of business. And also when we are submitting anything, it needs to be in a format that he or she is able to understand what you are trying to communicate in terms of the nature of activities, in terms of the claims that has been made, in terms of the tax positions that you have taken, in terms of various legal issues that are there. So first is, the basic is where it is related to the communication, I think we need to ensure that the registered email IDs, mobile numbers, all of that is updated on the income tax portal. The secondary contact details are also updated. Very often one would only have the primary contact details, and secondary, because it's not mandatory, one would not bother, but that is something which needs to be done. We need to check the portal at regular intervals. We need to add and update the authorized representatives so that they can respond to the notices. Now, of course, because the EVC is not mandatory and the digital signature is not mandatory, the authorized representative can actually log in and still upload without having to log in through their particular ID. Then I mentioned that for non-individual taxpayers, avoid use of individual email IDs, instead use functional email IDs created for tax purposes, so that if there's a change in the person, your email ID still remains the same. Now, for scrutiny, what are the things we need to kind of constantly be prepared? We should identify what are the recurring issues. We should identify what are the key transactions. So like the physical hearing also, one would have normally kept the key data ready. So we need to keep all that key data ready. We need to keep, we know that if there is a scrutiny, because there is a reasonable intimation that one receives when the case is selected for scrutiny. So having known that the case is selected for scrutiny, one needs to start keeping the tax dossier, that keeping the tax files ready. So it could be copies of, breakup of different expenses, copies of, agreements, some sample copies, simple things like additions to assets. Those are depending on the nature of the business, or depending on the nature of adjustments made in earlier years. There would be certain details which will be asked for every year. So those can be kept ready, so that when the final notices come, when the final hearing happens, one has adequate time to fine-tune it and to submit it on time. Keep the 26 AS and the annual information statement, keep all of that reconciled. Individuals can keep all the relevant bank statements, bank summaries, the proof of investments, donations, property related documents, all of that they can keep. So for example, if there is capital gains and there is reinvestment, one knows that this is the data that the department will ask, or they have opened a capital gains account scheme. One knows that these are the data which are definitely going to be there. So it is always advisable to keep all of that ready. For focus items and faceless, we will come to it in a couple of minutes. And even when the tax audits are done, we should consider collating and compiling all the data at the time of finalizing the tax audits. Yeah, so that one is basically ready when the scrutiny is coming. Similarly, we should be mindful of the time provided in the notices. We should try and file the response by time and date. We should, keep a margin and file it, because we know that they do not receive it at the time we have filed it. We should conceptualize the submissions and the flow and break the submissions into smaller parts if necessary. Uh, Basically, make it in a reader-friendly format. Make it in a format that the department understands and does not get into a presumption that you are filing so much of data so as to confuse and confuse or distract them. So the moment you give data which is precise to the point, that wins half the battle. Maybe there have been times we have actually used charts and diagrams. I remember in the case of a issue of agricultural land and distance from the municipality limits, to prove that it was within that distance, we actually had to give him some charts and diagrams. In case of sometimes, for additions to assets or use of assets, sometimes you may need to give some data which is not only in numbers, which is in more than numbers. Like they say, no, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Sometimes these are of course only in certain very, very specific instances that one needs to do it. Excel sheets to provide large amounts of data. Then supporting documents also should be given. Again, simple things like, page numbering, indexing, wherever the supporting documents is relating to a particular annexure, if there is cross-referencing and all that is always better. So instead of putting annexure 1, 2, 3, if there is a chronological page number, it's always easier to read. So the assessing officer, whoever is reading it, also feels that the data is given in a format which is easy to read. So providing indexes, breakup of agreements, invoices, supporting documents into appropriate sizes. Very often, when PDF documents are submitted, good copies. These are the finer points, or these are the smaller things, but these become very important points, because if they are clear copies, if they are reader friendly, it's much better. Ultimately, it is data which they are asking for and which you have to give. So it's better to give it in the first instance rather than give it in a certain format and then the department again asking for it. Submissions also must be specific, related to the point raised in the questionnaire, and must provide all reasonable details, facts supporting. And again, if there is some data which is so bulky and so unreasonable or so irrelevant, one may give an explanation as to why you are not able to provide that. And then you can provide a part of that data as the assessing officer may seek. And don't leave anything to oral explanation. Your submission should accept all arguments, facts. So one more important thing is, today, if something is missed out and one has to fight an appeal, and that data or those basic documents are not there on the records of the assessing officer, it becomes an additional evidence. So again, providing additional evidence at the time of the appeal has another set of challenges, because then it's eventually still going to go back to the assessment unit for verification. So even if you're providing additional evidence at the time of litigation, it will go back to the assessment unit. So you might as well give whatever is the factual data at the time of the assessment procedure. Then video conference related. So keep the identification documents, soft copy of all documents, all of that ready, so that it is easier to, explain. Seek VC adjournment only. The request for VC as well as request for any adjournment only on that VC tab and not through letters, because through letters that is not adequate. If the authorized representative is likely to appear, he should also be added so that he or she can join the VC. Be clear in thoughts and arguments to present the case, because they have limited time. So you need to be very clear as to, what are the points you want to discuss, what are the points you want to say, so that, the purpose of asking for the video conference is resolved, the purpose is met. One of the other practical issues is, very often under 143(1)(a), you would see some adjustments. And typically for a tax audit case, there would be that 36(1)(5)(a) adjustments. or there would be something on 43B versus a 40A9 adjustment. In the ITR, it would have been added under one clause. In the tax audit, it is under some other clause. So those kind of errors, and there would be proposed adjustments that sometimes one would have written, for rectification. Sometimes, one has not responded because the 143(1)A has not been received by the assessee, or it's just lying in the portal, or various other reasons. And in the faceless assessment, whilst there are no additions in the assessment, the adjustments which are made under 143(1)A that have been considered. So whilst the assessment order says that the returned income is accepted, when you see the calculation, the assessment order is not giving any figures, but it just says that after discussion, the return income is accepted. But when you see the calculation, it is taking the income as per 143(1)A. So that you must keep in mind, that you would need to follow up with the department for the you would need to follow up with the department for carrying out the rectification. Similarly, again, one relevant point in this is where there are adjustments made under 143(1)A. We have seen instances where a 270A penalty has also been initiated. Whilst not levied, it's been initiated because there is a slight difference in the original returned income and the assessed income. But there is 270A also talks about levying penalty where there is a difference between the income assessed and the income under 143(1)A. So in such cases, you would not have a penalty provision. You would not have a levy of penalty. So that's another thing which you may want to keep in mind. Then there are those grievance email IDs. If one may try, one may need to use it in cases there is some challenge. And you may approach the jurisdictional assessing officer in case there is any doubt in jurisdiction after receipt of the assessment order. And there is no need to attempt and file submissions with the AO. There have been instances where one has heard about the assessing officer asking for details, but that that's not required. They are not even authorized to ask for details. Now I'll just take 2-3 minutes. There are some focus items for assessment. So tax authorities obtained all this data, from Form 26AS, Annual Information Report, Inside Portal, MCA website, investigation wing details. And basically based on that, they would ask for details. And one will need to, whenever there is a scrutiny, one will need to keep in mind that these are the likely details asked for. When they are doing the risk-based scrutinies, they are looking at the customs duty payment, import details. They're cross-checking. We have seen often GST reconciliation of turnover as per GST and as per the books. Then your property difference, the stamp difference between the stamp duty value and the transaction value, if at all. Then your foreign remittances. So I mean, basically, these are the items which the department looks at, and these are the things we need to keep in mind. We need to keep ready whenever there are scrutiny assessments. And I'll just end by saying that it is, going for an I would not say appearing, but virtually appearing for faceless assessments and handling faceless assessments. It's like moving into a new house. One is used to the old house, one is comfortable, you have everything, you have your bania, you have your grocery, you have your good neighbors, you have everything set for you. But when you're moving to a new house, there is excitement, there is a lot of new things, one has to figure out a lot of things. So this faceless assessment is like moving into a new house, and one hopes it's better, it's bigger, it's more interesting, and it is more just. It is, whatever were the subjectivities involved, those subjectivities go away. So whilst initially there are teething troubles, and all of us have faced, a couple of bad orders, all of us have faced teething troubles, but one hopes that eventually this is all going to be for the better. And, that's something which is there, and we have to live with, and we have to do our best to overcome whatever are the challenges that are being faced currently. And there are a couple of slides on the procedure of the faceless assessment, which are self-explanatory. So I'll not take any time on that. Thank you very much, everybody, for a second half of patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We are very much thankful to you for the wonderful session and such a knowledgeable one you are. Thank you, ma'am. We have some queries, but I request you, can we take it after
Sure.
second session? Okay,
Sure.
thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I would like to welcome our second speaker of the day, CA Nidhi Agrawal, ma'am. She's I would like to introduce with you all. She's a finance professional, an educationist, a speaker and trainer, and active in female empowerment areas. She is also felicitated and honored by the various awards like Empowered Women Award on International Women's Day 2020, Power Award of Excellence in Mumbai by Aspiring She. Among top 20 inspiring females from all walks of life by Times of India, Groups on International Women's Day 2019. This is a remarkable achievement for her and for all of us to receive the honor from Director of IIM. She is taking and conducting various seminars on seminars and workshops for female financial planning, management, money management, and options for investment. Ma'am has completed her CA and CITP from ICFAI and worked with the reputed corporates in metros and having experience of more than 1 decade. She has worked in risk management, internal audits, process controls, due diligence, and investment area. Today, she is going to acknowledge us by investment opportunities, by professional opportunities for women CAs in portfolio management, and what are the different avenues available for investments. Nidhi ma'am, welcome ma'am. It's over to you.
Thank you, Neetu, for giving a wonderful introduction. And thank you, WNBC, also for inviting me for this session, whereas I can share my favorite subject to study various economies and investment and global investment. So I would just love to share from whatever I have learned in practical terms. Yes, are you able to view my screen?
Yes,
Yes, ma'am, we are able.
Okay, yes. So
Yes,
this is all about, see, portfolio management, global investments, and all these topics are something which every chartered accountant is well familiar with. As such, in day-to-day life, we are managing our finances, our portfolios, our taxation matters. But it's good to become aware of certain things, you know, that keeps us reminding of what can be the future goals for us, because many a times in our own profession we are so much lost that sometimes we lost this track. So to bring a fresh perspective and again an awareness, it's good that we are, you know, reminding ourselves of what all options can be there for portfolio management as well as global investing. So first of all, if prima facie, if we discuss about global investing part, let's move on to what exactly the global investment is. What exactly it means? Just a global investment in common parlance, as we do understand, it's all about investing into the instrument that are not in our geography, that are in other geography, and making the best portfolio out of it, along with following the international rules and regulations. So of course there are various benefits if we are following global investments, because of the more and more diversification comes in. Now, as we see geography wise also, various countries have different political reign. So of course we get that benefit of you know, various kinds of different economy, the growing economy, especially if I talk about the US economy, that's one of the very developed economy. So your risk mitigation, of course, happens. You are hedging out the risk. In the developed economy, you have more chance to gain and you know, to increase your capital appreciation. So that way, these benefits are of course there. So global investing, as I've told you, it's all about diversification. and it's important to explore the foreign markets and the companies abroad. Now we see invest globally from India if we see. So it's all about sky is the limit, I would say. Of course, Southeast Asian markets are also promising, but if I compare, there is always a prominence and assurity in US market. So that is something which is the first choice of any of the investors. Yes, basically what we are doing is whatever the securities are issued by the companies or governments in other countries. So in those securities and those shares we are investing. Yes, sorry. You're not able to.
Can you do your slideshow, please?
Yeah, I think it's already on the slideshow.
No. So,
Yes, already slideshow. Okay.
um,
So I was discussing about this uh, various kinds of diversification when we are getting when we are investing in the foreign market by the securities which are issued by their companies or by their governments, so as to enhance our returns and so as to get the maximum return. Because of, so what are the benefits are we directly getting it is all in terms of the exchange rates. Now, exchange rate, first of all, is in place as something which is very relevant as far as foreign investment is concerned. So, exchange rate is, of course, first a relevant thing. Then comes your interest rate, which, of course, in foreign markets also the interest rates are fluctuating, and that way the volatility and you can always hedge the risk and the capital can be appreciated. And then, of course, we were talking all about the geographical areas and geopolitical events. Recently, only we have seen about one of the very much, very different event that has taken place in Afghanistan, the acquisition by Taliban. So that has not only given the changes in their economy, but very many economy, including the US markets. So if any geopolitical events or changes are happening, so that is, of course, factored into each and every market, including the US market or Indian economy as well. Yes, so as now we are going ahead, we'll be talking more in terms of benefits and risk of global investing. But before that, see the question arises, why should we prefer US stock market? Why should we prefer a developed economy or US stock market? Of course, we were talking about exchange rate. Of course, we were talking about the liquidity. We were talking about the portfolio diversification. But apart from that, any other factor which is coming to your mind why you should be investing in US market, specifically the equity market of US? Okay, the reason behind, see, one of the factor I would like to share is US market economy is very, very dynamic. That means 40% of the most valuable companies are based in America. Yes, so a lot of massive potential market are there as far as the US market is concerned. Overall, if I talk about the statistics also, it's around $30.5 trillion economy. And any idea what's India's size as far as the equity or stock market is concerned? What's overall, like, what's the India's overall capitalization? It's around $2 trillion. So if I'm comparing like $2 trillion against $30.5 trillion, we can understand the massive potential in American markets, right? So that's one of the greatest benefit that a US market is providing. Secondly, many of the Indian investors or say chartered accountants and we female chartered accountants also, they feel preferable also because the timings are good. Like evening 7 o'clock, like 8 o'clock, it's preferable because US market Indian timing is like evening 7 o'clock. So we are, completed with all our office tasks and it's the evening time. We can relax also and we can have a market watch out if we really want to invest in some of the good companies that are really worth for long-term investments as well. I'm not asking that only trading can be done, but yes, of course, if you are watching for a long-term global investments, that is a comfortable timing. So evening time, we can always, trace the market and what's the fluctuations going on so as to take that benefit. Okay. Moving ahead, as I was talking about the benefits of global investment, first of all, we have seen about the market capitalization and the massive potential the US market is offering. Second most important thing is all about your investment protection. Because of the very strict regulations in the foreign market, your more or less your investment are also protected. Of course, you have to be very vigilant. You have to have your own fundamental analysis. You have to have your own technical analysis. So one should always be very much aware and attentive of where your money is going. So that precaution we need to take care. But still, as it's a very developed economy, most of the companies show fairly good and decent returns. So first point is this. Second, as we were talking about the diversification because of the different geographical market or various events happening, so that benefit is factored. Then wide range of investment options. By wide range of investment options, we means around 40,000 plus companies are listed in New York and Nasdaq stock exchanges. So we have a wide and plethora of companies, whereas then we can select for global investments in American US markets. Typically like Indian market, these markets also have a categorization of mid cap, small cap, large cap. All the three kinds of sizes of the kind of companies you are investing. So if you want to know about this wide range of investment, I would just give a tip, like how we are categorizing it in the US market is mid cap is there, small cap is there, and your large cap is there. So according to the market capitalization, you can select the companies. That also you can select. There's a website specially. Yes. Sorry. Actually, I've clicked it. I don't know. See if it's happening now. Okay. So we were talking about the various kinds of baskets which can be provided. Now, as I was talking about the range of three baskets, how we will select the companies. If you want to really have a good portfolio mix of all the various kinds of investment baskets, what you will be doing is from each company, from each category, you can select 3 or 4 companies, like a small range companies, mid-range companies, mid-cap, and then the large cap companies. And from each category, 2 or 3 companies can be selected. So that way we can have a wide range of investment options. And how are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? So there are various websites. There are various websites through which you can find out the companies in the American market, like wallstreet.com is there. Then your Yahoo financing.com is there. So different, then key ratios, if you really want to analyze, there's one website known as Morning Star Key Ratios. So with the help of that, you can study, you can have your own fundamental analysis, and you can sort out the companies as per the basket and the range of your investments. One more benefit which a global market, especially the US market, is giving is that you can invest in fractions. Fractions means here in Indian, unlike Indian market where you are buying say at least 1 share or 10 shares or 20 shares, but unlike that in US markets you can even buy fraction shares. That means in points also. Because if your investment size is lower, as you are investing in dollars, and if you are not interested to put in a huge sum of money, then accordingly what you can do is you can invest in fractional shares, and that will have the same impact. Correct? So that is also very, very important. Yes. See, everything is not very rosy picture. I wouldn't say that everything is very rosy or it's very easy that you are going on for the global investing and you can just mint money in dollars. There are various risks also which are associated in global investment markets, which you need to consider. So what are the risk is high transaction cost. One by one, if we understand, high transaction cost means exclusively you need a different account for global investments which has a high transaction value. It ranges around $1 to $3 per transaction. And sometimes you need to pay them a lump sum fees for account opening and account operation and maintenance as well. So that way, global investment becomes uh, little bit expensive also if you are not interested in regular investment but just looking for one or two stocks, then opening a separate account and just purchasing few of the stocks and keeping it there doesn't solve your purpose because you're incurring the other cost as well. So that has to be taken into consideration. Then the currency volatility is of course there as the forex is involved. So as and when there will be a changes in the forex rate, that will be having an impact on your investment value as well. So this one risk of currency and forex fluctuation rate has to be taken into consideration. Then lastly about political risk. Of course, if this is an investment opportunity, there are also risks associated with various geographies and different global markets. Yes, COVID has given an impact throughout the world all over. But just imagine a situation if it would have been given a hit only in the US market, then what? Or only London or European market, then what? So, of course, these geography and political risk are always associated, and we need to take into consideration these risks as well. Uh, See, one of the important thing we will be discussing with this risk is uh, the the incentive behind why we are investing. So just as I was talking about COVID, just from my practical experience, one of the companies share pricing hitted me and I just wanted to share this experience with you. So Moderna was a vaccine of United States of America, which they developed. And in initial days, it was on trial basis, whereas they had not got the final certification. So what happened? Initially, the price of the Moderna was trading in US market around say anywhere $15. It started like the initial pricing of the same. So it started along like $15. And then the certifications and government approvals, and there was a long process. People were also confused. Even the American investors were very much confused whether it will be a successful vaccination or not by the company. So there was a lot of confusion, but those who were very sure about it, or those who had invested even like a small part to it, had a long way to achieve. So I'll just share, interestingly, I'll just share this particular case study. What happened in Moderna, as I've told you, the share prices started from around $15, $18. And say if we are investing in INR, now I'm talking in INR because we are investing here. So if we are investing around say 1 lakh rupees INR, 1 lakh rupees in the particular script. So say $20 dollar was the pricing. And if we are getting like around 5,000 shares also, for example, so like what's the today's value of the share is around more than 400. So like the high which the particular company has made was beyond like $490. So it started the journey from $15 and it hit a high level of almost like say $500. 497 was the high made. So it was almost like $500. So that much of the scope was there in a particular company for your profit margin. But of course, it all depends. It could have been a failure also. So there's always a risk also associated with your hard-earned money. But again, if you have a very good fundamental analysis and if you study the company and the ratios and everything well, it helps you to eliminate that kind of risk. Yes, FANG, all-time favorite stocks of United States of America. These are the 5 companies very commonly known as FANG. That means Facebook, Apple, then your Amazon, Netflix, and Google. And Interestingly, they are the stocks of the best performing American technology companies. Yes, so they consist of around 22% of the market share of the US market, stock market. And those who have invested even in these technological scripts have earned huge money. As an investor, as a trader, even in short-term capital gains were very high, and long-term, of course, is a very different story. So these are the technology-based companies which had really done well and which had given very high past 5 years records on the Nasdaq stock exchanges. Also, as this was the era, see, last 10 years was the era where we were talking about the IT companies and the social media platforms and the companies who are into technology and communication. So you also need to study what era will be the next one. It's not that Facebook had done great, so in future also that the same company will be doing great. There can always be changes as per the sector and the industry classification. New companies like new blue chip companies or new cloud computing companies, the coming era, I feel personally, as per my reads and as per my research, I feel that coming era is all about your cloud computing. It's all about artificial intelligence. It's all about robotics. So these can be the companies which can really fetch a good values and a good profits to the investors. But let's see, then everyone has their own, intuition and conviction towards the investment paths. Yes. Now coming to the investment portfolio creation or making your portfolio. See, as I was talking about, each and everyone is very well familiar where you are investing your money and what kind of portfolio you want. But then depending upon your own objectives and your purpose, you should park your money. See, most of the people, what they do is, what common mistakes are we are doing in the stock market, including me. Even I have done and burned hands a lot. What I've done is we are actually either we are hearing what other people are speaking up or what our friends are sharing. These are commonly known as in share market that tips are being given. Yes. Okay, you buy this, and then everyone is like, okay, I'm buying, you also buy, and we are just forwarding the message in the WhatsApp groups and all. But if we are not having a pre-study, we should not park our hard-earned money in any of the investment avenues. That's the do's and don'ts. If we talk about, that's very, very important while creating your own investment portfolio. We are just hearing somewhere, or we're just looking the advertisement somewhere, or we are just, because now social media and all is very much hyped, so we see in YouTube channel some of the other analysts speaking something, because they don't know what our actual purpose is, and we don't know how much the vision they are talking all about. So until unless we have not done our research, we should not follow anyone, a friend circle. We are attending any marriage, we are meeting someone, and the person is telling us, yes, I bought this share and you also please invest. But even if you want to invest, just gather all the information. Now there can be again two parts of analysis that can be made. Your fundamental analysis, which is all about your ratio, the fundamentals of the company, the profitability, the profit and loss statements, the balance sheets. So you need to study them. Of course, being a chartered accountant, we do understand all these ratios and financial analysis. So that is very important. Second part comes is all about your technical analysis. Yes, which is all about your charts, your candlestick diagrams, highs and lows, what are the range you are creating. Yes, different range, 52-week high, low. So different things you will study, and then accordingly you will have to take a decision on your investments. Yes, so as commonly we understand about portfolio investment, it's all about ownership of stock, bond, or any other financial asset that we are expecting it that it will give a fair return, or it will grow the value over the time, or it can have both the benefits. So that's what our fair expectation is, and which is quite okay. So now depends if we want to actively manage our portfolio or we want to be a passive investors. There are kinds of investors like active, passive. Lazy investors are also there who once in a while, 2 3 years, once in 2 years, they'll just check the portfolio. So that's fine. As per your requirement and as per your objective, you can always decide on what exact strategies you want to follow in the stock markets or your general investments. Yes, and the question is what chartered accountant can do and manage, whether we can manage the portfolios. Yes, of course. See, in today's world, there's nothing that a CA is not doing. And if it requires a lot of managing financial skills and all, then sure, we can, look forward that this is our fraternity's thing. So chartered accountant as such, doesn't create and manage the portfolio, but yes, as a business we have lot many things. We manage retail investors also. We can be a fund manager also, we can be into technical analysis also, we can be a financial analyst also, right? But if you're practicing chartered accountant, we cannot be a portfolio manager. So apart from that, we can have in fundamental analysis, we can have a corporate and in compliances related to SEBI. We can also be fitted in analysis part. We can also give report writing. That's one of the very good area for many of the females who would just like to know what are the areas you can explore. So yes, report writing every day when the market is opening, specialized because of all the highs, lows, or movement in the market. So daily reports are there. So if you're really good in writing skills, and if you have a knowledge regarding, if you have interest in stock market and knowledge regarding how to play with the writing skills of financial report writings and the stock market, so that can also be one of the area. Yes. So if we talk about portfolio management, basic objectives which we are seeking from a good portfolio management is to capital appreciation. First and foremost, we look for capital appreciation. Say if I'm investing 2 lakh rupees today, a year after, what can be the return that I need to get? Minimum return, of course. I'll consider all the volatility of the market and the COVID situation and the lockdowns, which was very new, like 2 years back. That was something which is a very unique scenario for everyone. Nobody had an idea that the stocks will be at almost 40 to 50% discounts once the first lockdown was announced. So isn't it a very crazy thing? Whatever you were purchasing for 100 rupees is now available in the market just for 40 rupees or 50 rupees, according to the valuations of the company. So the basic objectives which we seek is your capital appreciation and then your maximum returns on the investments. So investment size should be as per your budget and your objective. Risk optimization is there, yes. Allocating resources optimally, that you have to see. Then flexibility should be there. You should be building a portfolio in a manner that flexibility should be there in a portfolio. About if you want to really liquidate your investment, what could be the flexibility? Not all in the same basket. Means if you have a long term objective, say of 4 years or 5 years, and if you're putting your money in 10 stocks, not all can be with the same objective of 5 years of holding period. Because in case if I'll need money after 6 months, then what? Or if I need money after 2 years. So there should always be some stocks that can be liquidated in 6 months to a year. Then certain stocks that, that have a mid kind of vision, 2 to 3 years, and then your long-term vision. So that flexibility should always be there. And then of course, market risk, you have to be very much careful about the market risk and challenges coming up, which we already discussed, like COVID was one of them. Then various, like this Afghan war was there. So with all this changes and fluctuations in crude, oil, petrol, different things going on. So even the global scenario has to be taken into consideration while you are deciding your investment portfolios. Yes, various benefits we have seen already. Diversification is there, massive potential is there in global markets. That benefit will be there. Income, yes, if you are investing in income generating stocks that give you a regular dividend yield, or if they are high dividend paying stocks, then that benefit is there. Sometimes bonus options is there. Shares get split up, so you get that benefit split ups and bonus and dividend yielding. So there's an additional income if you are investing in such dividend yield stocks and all. Liquidity, of course, I discussed that in your portfolio, you should have a balance between long-term vision, short-term vision, and mid-term vision, so that you can liquidate as and when your requirement is. Yes, typically in our Indian mind setup, what we do is our portfolio looks like this. Whereas in we have investments in FDs as well, mutual funds as well, government bonds as well, and then stock market as well. But then again, depends. Now, many of the aggressive investors who don't want low return and who are looking for a dynamic returns, they don't prefer investing in FDs and mutual funds or government bonds. They're very aggressive and they are looking for high returns. So they are only focusing on the last section, which is all about your stock equity capital market. But then again, depends if you are really if you want to safeguard your capital, and if you have certain liabilities and responsibilities, which financial commitments are there, and you don't want to take the risk. So of course you can divide it in a manner so as to have a proper mix as per your own requirements. Yes, these two, so well associated with the market and everything. We all are so familiar with the bull and bear markets. Everybody who is actually trading or investing in the market know about the basic logos and the images of these two. So the stock market got the name bull and bear because of the Cabrillo's Spanish night that is in California. They observed bears swiped down and bulls hooked upwards. So thus, this was the analogy. A bull market is a market that is on rise and where the condition of the economy are generally favorable. So we see, favorable, everyone, likes to be in the favorable market and earn, and you are looking for higher capital appreciation and more returns. And it happens once the market is bullish, you want to invest because you see a good rally coming up. So your confidence level automatically increases that way. So that is all about bull market against bear market, which exists in the economy that is receding and where most stocks are declining in value. So as we have talked and we have seen already about the lockdown phase and the COVID time. So that was a bearish market, although it was a temporary phase, but then market was really low and many good stocks were at discount. In bull market, there is strong demand and weak supply of the securities. Whereas in the bear market, that is the opposite. More people are looking to sell than buy. And that's why it's all about sentiments. Then we check about the sentiments. What are the market sentiments and where is it actually moving? Yes. So this is typically various combinations I tried to gather when you have different objective and purpose. If you are looking for aggressive growth portfolio, so naturally you are seeking a lot of capital appreciation. Whereas then if you are looking for a moderate growth portfolio, then you want a current income also, and you want a balance between income and your capital appreciation. And purely if you're going for income portfolio, then you are looking more about your current income part, whereas in the stocks can yield dividend or something like that. So that is your objective. Then yes, that's a normal growth portfolio. Then comes a conservative growth portfolio where you don't want to erode your capital and you are looking a good combination so as to have a conservative approach and to protect your capital. And then lastly, all about your interest accumulation portfolio, where you will mainly look for the income as well as your total protection about the portfolio, and you're not much interested to divide your portfolio. Yes. So as we were, looking upon various investment strategies also and various options also, we came to know that, of course, in each and every category, we will be dividing it into a large cap, a mid cap, and a small cap. But if you are really want to have a safe investment, then you should please avoid investing in small cap companies because capital is easily eroded. try and focus on the best of the investments that are large cap industries, or few of the stocks you can pick even from a mid cap funds. Yes, so yes, that was all about it. And in the conclusion, I would just tell that for chartered accountants, if you talk about, so these are really good areas to work and to practice as a portfolio manager. Many of the people are also studying, like CAs are studying CFA and courses of FRM, so that you can have a proper risk mitigation as a fund manager, and then you can avail various opportunities provided by the capital market. Then there are various certifications also which are provided by NSE and all. If you are really very specific about going into these areas and making your career into these areas. So this was the capital, appreciation mix and your purpose we were talking about. And lastly, in conclusion, we have seen that. So see, international investing is the need of the hour. I really feel that international investing is something which, even if we are not into it or if we are not actively doing that, but at least we should study various stocks and how the investment is going, how the rich billionaires like Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger and all this Mark Zuckerberg and all, how they are actually increasing their net worth by taking a good financial decisions. So it's not that we are investing from the day one or something, but this session, why we are keeping, just to bring about an awareness so that you can at least have a track and you can research into the global markets further. It's a continuous journey and you will have to do lot of research. If you have 2 to 3 hours daily, and if you really want to be active in the market, then this much of time you need to give, because see, it's our hard earned money and we should not feel that the most important thing, what mistake we are doing is, we give it to any of the broking house and we are like, I'm investing here and the brokers will take care, the securities brokerage companies and all. But no, that's not a solution to it, because until and unless we are not into the game, we are not going to play it properly. Correct. So we need to understand what exactly we are into and where our money is going, why we are putting it in a particular stock, what is our objective, what is our expectation of return in the end. So that all, and it required a lot of analysis from an individual side also. A lot of websites are there, like I've already told you, Morningstar key ratios, where you can just type in the company's name and the key ratios will be there, and then you can study the whole company's profitability and the key ratios, and you can do the fundamental analysis, and then you can take the decision on investment. So that is there. So of course, international investing is the need of the hour, and we need to achieve a strong portfolio diversification, that is there. But for that, you have to be very well read, because the benefits are very, very lucrative. You must pay attention to the risk as well. As I've already told you, we cannot park our money to any of the brokerage house and just sleep tight. No, that's not a solution. Also, a lot of information is available online, and you have to be very much careful on what information you need to take, and just you can't follow any random YouTube video and just invest your money. But yes, online you can have your own research and then you can take your own decision. Also, if you have any good financial advisor, before making any decision, you can discuss, and then accordingly you can decide on your portfolio management as well as global investment part. So I hope so. This was a good awareness and an eye-opening session for global market. Especially I've covered US economy and US market because that's the most stable one. I don't want to talk about other markets, whereas a lot of liquidity and fluctuations are there, liquidity crises are there, and our investments are not safe. So because of the very, very developed economy, I have basically focused on American stock market. So hope so. That was a good knowledgeable session, and you might have got few various tips on how you can invest in the global market. Also, as I was talking about the investing in American market, you need to have a separate account, a separate demat account. You can't invest with your Indian market. So that's one thing that came to my mind and I just want to share. So you need to have a separate account, and through LMR, that is the remittances takes place in your global account, your INR money, then they are converting it via Forex, and then you can start your investing or trading. Yes, so thank you for listening, and yes, any questions are welcomed now.
Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am, for the wonderful session. It's an awesome one. Ma'am, we have some queries from our listeners. I just want to know, is there any course available for portfolio management?
So yes, there are various courses available for portfolio management. Like
And
plethora of courses given by, yes. So there are private institutes also, there are reputed B schools also that are giving you the courses. Then there are various varieties like short term, say 6 months, 1 year, 2 year. So now it all depends upon your purpose, whether you really want to go as a professional fund manager and you want to pursue as a career, or you want just for your knowledge and trading, you can do a short term like 3 to 6 months course, right? So like that, like depending on what exactly you want. So if you'll be very specific, you can just mail me also later also, if anything very specific, like this is the thing you want, so very specific, I can answer as per your requirements.
okay,
Many
okay.
institutes are giving portfolio management, yes, very upcoming field.
Ma'am, what do you think about cryptocurrencies as an investment
Yes,
option?
yes. Crypto, see, I have studied crypto basically, and it was not very legal. Like recently, only now the government of India and RBI is considering to make it legal in India, but that was not legal few years back. Whereas in that was very much legal in other markets like European and Chinese market, Singapore, Southeast Asian market, and European market and US market. But then see again one thing, of course you can make money, no doubt. Many people play it, but then what I've seen, most of the people whom I've came across, they've just done it. Why? वो same चीज पार्टी में मिले, my friend has invested crypto, उसने बोला बिटकॉइन में डाल दो, मैंने 50,000 डाल दिए, पता नहीं कोई स्टडी नहीं है, you have not read it anywhere, उसके पैसे तो डूबे, आपके भी डूब गए, मतलब यू नेवर नो बिकॉज यू नॉट स्टडीड. उसका एक एल्गोरिथम होता है ना, कॉन्ट्रैक्ट बेस्ड है, पूरा कॉन्ट्रैक्ट है जो कि सॉफ्टवेयर पे बन गया है, एंड देन अकॉर्डिंग टू दैट it gives you the return. But until and unless you have not studied what exactly is the fundamental thing involved in that particular cryptocurrency, जैसे Bitcoin का algorithm is different, Litecoin का different है, Ethereum altogether different है, Ripcoin एकदम different है. Yes, so you need to understand what is a safe kind of investment, and then only ऐसा नहीं कि because daily one or the other Bitcoin will be entering into the market, but it's not that कि आप just ऐसे ही लगा लो. Of course, it has a good future and it's one of the good investment avenue. But again, risk and return, both you have to study properly and study the algorithm part nicely. Fundamentally, you should be clear where you're investing in. Yes.
Okay. What do you think? What will be the taxation on it? How it will be taxed by Indian government?
Yes. So US stock markets, if I talk about investing in US companies or global market investment, so that's one of the very, very good thing, Neetu, we have observed because of the DTA agreement, yes, double taxation avoidance agreement we are having with the US government, like US market. So we will be having a taxation liability in India, and we don't have to pay an additional tax in USA on the securities, whatever we are investing, and if you are having according to like whatever the short term or long term capital gain.
Okay. And there are so many courses launched by NSE, or it's going on from so many years. So which course is advisable? Generally we saw कि institute exams clear होते ही हम बहुत सारे उसके modules clear कर लेते हैं NSE पे जो available है. So which are the best one for this profile?
See, again, I think this question is again repetitive, right? But again, I would answer, not a problem, with a little bit of variation I'll give. पहले भी जैसे किसी ने पूछा portfolio management के क्या courses available है ना, how we can do it. So what I will tell you, of course, NSC also is having a lot of good courses, and very many other private institutes are also running down. But आपका objective क्या है? Do you want to become a fund manager in any foreign MNCs, or you want to go into the market in depth? So then you will have to have your additional degrees and courses, like if you do FRM, US GAR. US GAR, FRM gives you a wide range of knowledge as far as the risk mitigation is there, as far as the capital market is there, equity market, US, you can have statistical modeling, business modeling. It's a very, very wider course. So FRM US GARP is something which it's like CFA, like people do CFA also, FRM also. So if you really want to become a fund manager or something, the scope is different. Lekin chalo, if you are thinking, okay, fine, I'm just here because I'm just want to invest something and I'm just doing it for my fun, or I want to earn something side में part time, तो फिर इतना heavy course करने की जरूरत नहीं. I mean, it requires a lot of dedication. You need to study the whole course, no? CFA or FRM or all these additional modules. So for fun thing, you can like do any short term course, 3 months, 6 months. So again, depending upon your objective, you need to select upon the course. Yes.
Okay. Ma'am, considering our economy, what do you suggest? Is investment in commodity market is safe or not? Or should we invest or not?
So are you asking about commodity market or equity market or mutual funds?
No, it's commodity. It's purely commodities.
It's
No
purely
equity.
commodity. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So commodity also, commodity is not very fundamentally driven market, to be very frank. Yes, it doesn't have any proper analysis part, or there are no proper equations or formula wherein you are justifying the prices of commodity. Lot of speculation is there in the commodity market. However, if you have got a good track, if you have tracked down various commodities, and if you have observed the pattern of their highs and lows, and if you are into that market, say if you are into that business, it's all experience. For say some person is trading in, for example, if I'm trading in this gram dal, right? Gram dal, or
Yes.
any pulses or any cereals. So if this is my family business and I do understand the movement of this particular commodity, because I've seen is my forefathers doing the same business, my father, my grandfather. So I know now, I understand that particular market. So that can be safe, because there are no logic or rational formula that can calculate the high range or low range of commodity market. But right, if you are a player of that market and you understand the sentiment, then of course you should invest. Commodity market, I'm telling you.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Saroj, ma'am.
Yeah.
Saroj, ma'am. Ma'am, a question is ki if we have received a letter, if we have received a notice which is showing DIN number, okay, but that document is not available on the portal, that document is not available on my login. Why can't we receive the document on email or on login?
So normally that should not be the case. If that is a case which has happened after the new website, that may be possible, because the new portal is a great challenge. So that may be possible. In fact, one of the reasons, we mentioned about the 6 September circular which has come, which has said that some cases will be transferred to jurisdictional assessing officer. So in addition to, those central cases and international tax cases, what they said is because of some technical reasons, if faceless assessment is not happening. So maybe these kind of cases, they're looking at transferring to the jurisdictional officer. But once having received a notice, I think one needs to respond. Now, the question is, if it is not there on the portal, how will you respond?
Yes, ma'am.
Because ultimately, only if there is a notice and there's a pending proceedings, you will respond. What we have in a couple of cases, if there is any of the earlier notices where there is a partial submission made, there could be a window to respond. So that you will have to see on case-to-case basis.
Okay.
So in one particular case, we had responded to all the notices, and this is pre the problem of the new portal. We had responded to the last notice, but we wanted to make some additional response. But in one of the earlier notices, there was a partial submission. So we had actually put in, our response there. So I think we'll have to kind of innovate and look at practical solutions.
Okay.
And otherwise, we will have to put it on the grievance. We will have to, go to the jurisdictional commissioner.
Time limit is certain. If we put it in the grievance, then it may take certain time. It
Correct.
may take a number of days to resolve it.
Correct. But so one thing what we must always do is, wherever we are facing all these challenges, keep screenshots. I mean, that's not a solution, but that's going to help. So for example, if I'm not able to upload because there's no pending this thing. So we should keep the screenshot giving that day and that time. So there is evidence, going forward. And
Okay.
with that screenshot, we should approach the jurisdictional commissioner.
Okay.
So,
And
yeah, go ahead.
okay. Ma'am, what is suggestible in such a case? We should always submit partial response, or when we are sure we should submit final response? In case of final partial response, you have option.
Yeah, so normally, where it is the initial notices, the first couple of notices, and we have all the details, we should submit full response.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's better, no? We should always try and submit the full response.
Oh, okay.
But when I say full response, obviously, if we are able to give all the data. So suppose that in the questionnaire you have 10 questions, but we have got the response for 9 questions, then it will go as a partial response.
Ma'am, do you think faceless assessment is really helpful in other acts also, like other than income tax? It will help.
See, as long as the department, whichever department is handling, is trained adequately, I think it's a win-win situation. So whilst the ITAT is still not faceless, but because of the pandemic, there have been online hearings. So when the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal started the online hearings last year in June or July, the initial reaction of all the councils, all of us, I mean, all of us who have got matters at the ITAT was, how can we, have ITAT online hearing? Because when you go to the court, you have your ITRs, you show physically, you refer to different paper books, different documents. But over a period, everybody is adapted. In fact, the members who are, all 50 plus, 55 plus, maybe, they have all also, they've all adapted to Zoom and they're comfortable, they're asking questions, they're looking at documents, they're cross-referencing. So I think it's a question of being or adopting to the newer times. One has to kind of adapt to the new times. Only challenge, as I mentioned, that is why our role as professionals becomes all the more critical, is very often when you sit across, you're able to give a comfort about the bona fides to the assessing officer. But when you're writing, very often to explain everything becomes a challenge. And that's where we need to kind of improve our skill sets to be able to explain in a brief manner, to the assessing officer, to whoever, whether it is the technical unit who reads your submissions, whether it is the verification unit who's cross-checking, you will have to, give the submissions in such a manner that it's self-explanatory and it gives comfort and confidence to the assessing officer that what you're saying is complete and accurate. So that becomes a little of a challenge.
Has faceless assessment resulted in significant improvement in quality of assessment? Do you think so?
It is very often, it is like in a computer, when we learned computer in the beginning, we were told about this concept of GIGO, garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage in, garbage out, right.
So, I mean, I think in most of the cases, and obviously there have been exceptions. I mean, there have been cases where you've read assessment orders which have factually, which are prima facie, seem to be very, very prejudicial. But in most of the cases where you are able to explain, well, I think it's been reasonable. The department is facing challenges. I don't think, they are absolutely ready for it. We ourselves as professionals are, facing, we are learning new skill sets and all that. So whilst there are teething challenges, maybe, there is also a talk, and internationally also, I don't think faceless is a very common thing. Maybe some of the larger cases, or maybe where the issues are large, where the issues are significant, perhaps the department should look at giving for opportunity of personal hearing in these cases. And even the option of video conferencing should be, it should be at the instance of the assessee. That today, if I want to, it could be an assessing officer sitting anywhere, but today, if I want to talk and explain my case to him, I'm not able to convince in writing, I'm not able to explain in writing, I should be given that opportunity.
Okay.
So then that becomes a mix of, both personal hearing and faceless.
Tanu ma'am, do you have any query?
No, not anymore.
Okay, okay. So we should conclude.
Yes, we can conclude the program.
Thank you so much. We are very, very thankful to our speaker, to Saroj ma'am, जिन्होंने बहुत easily हमें explain करा what are the do's and don'ts of faceless assessment. Ma'am, this is the most important point. This is the most important thing जिसमें हम कहीं ना कहीं mistakes करते ही करते हैं. We are very, very much thankful to Nidhi ma'am, जिन्होंने नए avenues को explain करा, जिन्होंने female professionals को explain करा कि you can also go behind this, you can also make your career, you can also go for this also. We are very thankful to Women Members Empowerment Committee for this wonderful session, for providing this opportunity to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you. It's been
Thank
a
you so
pleasure.
much, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you.
was
It's
great
been a
pleasure to
pleasure.
be a part of this particular organization and to give our contribution here.
Thank you, ma'am.
all.
Thank you. Thank you.